Welcome to At Scale, the tnAchieves podcast. I'm Krissy, DeAlejandro, tnAchieves President and CEO. tnAchieves seeks to be humble but ambitious, disruptive yet intentional, and student-focused while also data-driven. We believe our mission is simple: enhance post-secondary opportunities and outcomes by providing holistic student supports rooted in community and accountability at scale. But the work is much more complex. Since 2008, we've broken some things in a great way. We've built many things, and we've created something that stems from the idea that a college credential can be a powerful equalizer. From helping individual students navigate the complexities of college to shaping the way Tennessee thinks about preparing and educating tomorrow's workforce, this podcast explores how tnAchieves intersects with partners across our state and throughout the country. Let's dig in with state and national thought partners, business and industry leaders, college and K-12 representatives, and all the others in between that inform, inspire, and interconnect with tnAchieves work. Here we go. Welcome to At Scale, the tnAchieves podcast. My name is Krissy DeAlejandro. For the last, forever now, I've served as president and CEO of tnAchieves, and we are relaunching our podcast in an effort to bring partners to the table to have conversations about workforce development, education, the pipeline, to talk about students. Really, at the end of the day, it's a very student-centered conversation. But we want to really dive into learning from one another. And I'm so excited to be joined by Ben Sterling, who will forever be my favorite tnAchieves student. He came to us as a high school student when we first launched in 2008. And Ben and I are going to be on a journey over the next, as long as this podcast sort of makes it out the chute, to better understand how we move as an education system, not only within the state of Tennessee, but also across the country. Ben, do you want to say hello?
Absolutely. So excited to be relaunching the tnAchieves podcast. I think we have an opportunity to bring some really exciting guests to the table that influence the work that we do, and hopefully at the end of the day, learn something from them to make our services to students are even better. As a former student in this program and now somebody that has spent over a decade working with tnAchieves, this is just exciting for me, and I think it's an opportunity to learn even more about the work that we're doing. So really excited about it.
I should probably clarify that Ben is no longer a student. He now serves as our Chief Content Officer at tnAchieves. So I'm excited for us to be on this journey. Well, we're kicking off with two of our closest partners at tnAchieves, Dr. Jon Rysewyk, who serves as the Superintendent for Knox County Schools, and Dr. Anthony Wise, who serves as the President of Pellissippi State Community College. I should read their very complicated and complex bios, but both incredibly smart, both incredibly accomplished. I knew Jon when he was the principal at Fulton. I think that's when we first met. And Anthony when he was serving, Anthony, Vice President of Student Services?
Academic and Student
Affairs. I knew I was going to get that title wrong. So we've known each other a really long time. But I'm excited to jump into this conversation because over the last 20 years, there's been so much intentionality around the work in Knox County that's brought us to where we are today. But I would love just for you both to really, maybe we'll start with you, Jon, and then we'll kick it to Anthony, to reflect on the last sort of 15 years, if you will, moving from when tnAchieves first launching in 2008. Jon, you were not superintendent at that time. You were the principal at Fulton at that time with the destiny of being the superintendent. But just walk us through sort of how you've seen the evolution over the last 15 years.
Yeah, that's great. And, so glad to be here to talk about this because this is so core to the mission of what we do in Knox County Schools is really trying to prepare that next generation. We take that seriously, 60,000 students, and we can't do that without partners like tnAchieves. So you're right, to be able to be part of that whole process from a principal perspective, now into the superintendent, I've gotten to see a lot of things happen I would say early on, there was probably a need for someone to call it out, right? There was kind of, if you go back to the early 2000s, there was lots of conversation, kind of where high schools were kind of more of a two-track system. You're smart, so take these honors classes, or you're good with your hands and you should go take these other things and kind of learn to do this. There was obviously a push to have something in that post-secondary space, because what I think folks were seeing was high school diploma was not going to be enough. And so really the folks at Tennessee Achieves, a lot of those early leaders really called out the need for that. I think even as a state, Governor Haslam did a lot of work in that on kind of Drive to 55, and just the foresight of leaders locally and also at the state level to understand that if Tennessee is going to prosper 10 years from now, we've got to start thinking about that now. And I think, then came all the every kid doesn't have the same path to get there. Every kid doesn't have the same supports to get there. Every kid doesn't understand. First generational parents don't understand how to, all this paperwork works and all these kinds of things. So there was a need for a lot of support for that. And my recollection of that early on was the most important thing. One is that Tennessee Achieves and the leaders around that called that out as a destination we needed to get to as a state and as a community. And then follow that up with, we're not just going to call it out, but we're going to talk about what supports are really needed by talking to kids, talking to families, talking to educators who are involved in that, to know what gaps are we going to need to fill to get there.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but I have great photos from my flip phone because we actually announced Knox Achieves when you were principal at Fulton. So I have these great photographs of Mayor Haslam at the time, and Randy, and obviously Mayor Ragsdale, and Tim Williams, and Rich Ray, and all the people that were there from the beginning. Just to put a finer point on this, like if you reflect on your time as principal, thinking about the students that you served at Fulton High School, which is sort of in the urban core of Knox County, what did college conversations look like for those students 15 or so years ago?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think a lot of what we saw were if you had a relative, right, who had navigated that journey, you had some knowledge. I had an uncle that went to school. I had a parent that maybe went to post-secondary at some level. I think those students were kind of at an advantage in twofold. They were an advantage, one, because somebody understood the mystery you had to unlock to get there. And I think they also, understood the importance of that. So which kind of built in an expectation for those kids. And then, especially where I was at in Fulton, large socioeconomic division there, you had this whole group of kids that wasn't even on their radar. It wasn't something that they were raised to think about. It was maybe a little more like life was a little more in their face, right? So they were kind of day to day, year to year, and there wasn't this kind of expectation, from 5 years old that everyone goes to college. And so I think what we saw there was just this kind of this maybe building or creating a future for kids that they couldn't see themselves, and very much had a staff committed to that. But again, a group of teachers and a principal can't do a lot about it with somebody or some organization from the outside coming in and saying, let us help financially, let us help structurally to make that happen. And that's what I remember about that day too. I do remember I didn't have as many gray hairs at that point either, but I also remember that was the time when we went, wait a minute, it's not just, encouraging kids to do it. There's an actual pathway, there's an actual process. This actually could become a reality for kids. And I think that it took a while for them to understand that, but I think the adults in the room did understand that we had a tangible way to get there besides just a hope and a promise.
Yeah, and there's something like beyond high school graduation to really start thinking about. Anthony, when we first met, Pellissippi integral in the entire Tennessee Achieves story. Think about the students that you serve at Pellissippi State and how that looks really different over the last sort of 15 or so years for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you ask me to say what the core mission was, access 15, 16, 17 years ago, and I think that's in part where the notion of Knox Achieves, how do we provide access to post-secondary? We believe that'll have an impact upon workforce down the line and help us grow local business and industry. And Knox Achieves came along at a time when it really aligned with a lot of the work that we wanted to do at Pellissippi State. When I started at the college 27, 28 years ago, we would advise in August, and the week before classes started, we would celebrate the fact that 800 or 900 people would come through and our enrollment was up because we registered all these people at the last minute. It's a terrible thing, right? Most of those students would not sustain because they hadn't completed a FAFSA. They haven't spent some time thinking about what their post-secondary experience would look like. And Knox Achieve began that process, and Ben was in that first group. If they were going to go to a community college or a technical college, they had to think about it a year ahead of time, just like the folks who were going to go to a four-year institution, public or private. So I think that was one of the most beneficial things for the young people in this community first and then statewide, is that it encouraged their families to think about that post-secondary journey in a different way, to do it ahead of time so that they could work with a mentor, complete the FAFSA, go through orientation so that they were ready to go when classes started in August, and they weren't making a last-minute decision about something that maybe they thought they should do, but they weren't 100% committed to. And that really aligned with the work we wanted to do at the college at the time, like moving up the admissions timeline, getting folks settled. And we've really grown from there, right? We did access work for several years, and then we began to think, well, access is not enough. So how do you think about access and the success of the students in the pipeline? And it's been just so much fun to watch that transition and journey inside the institution, and then with the support we've received from Knox Achieves and Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise.
Yeah, one of the things I'm going to interject. One of the things that I've shared across the state as I've now live in Middle Tennessee, and I've talked to Dr. Wise a ton. You talk about how Tennessee Promise really influenced campus culture. And I think one of the things that Pellissippi has done a really good job of is sort of embracing the first-time full-time freshmen and trying to create this experience. And they used a word where it made it more collegiate. It was like a transition. So I would love if you talk a little bit about how, because I remember as a student at Pellissippi in 2009, I was sort of just going to campus, going home. I wasn't spending a whole lot of time on campus. Part of that was on me because I wasn't embracing the things that existed there. But I think since then, with the introduction of Tennessee Promise and the influx of students, Pellissippi's done a really good job of providing these opportunities to stay. I was just there on the first day of classes this past fall, and students were just hanging out. They didn't have class for 3 or 4 hours. They were just on campus, just there hanging out. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I think it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think if you take that notion of access and how important it is, but then how do you build community around that? And we've done that a lot of different ways over the course of we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. So how do you keep the kind of clubs and organizations that students want to be engaged in during their time period? How do you impart the importance of students making a connection with another person, whether it's their mentor that they're working with, whether it's with their coach, whether it's with a faculty member, whether it's somebody else who's in their English 1010 class, right? That relationship is important. You need somebody you can turn to and say, hey, I missed class on Tuesday. Can you help me understand what the professor covered and get connected? We've long had a vibrant sort of student engagement and student life experience. We've spent a lot of time the last couple of years thinking about how we organize our academic departments around career communities. So we have students now who have similar academic and career interests grouped in the same academic departments, aligned with like programs. We're hoping that's going to have an impact on community. And then I'm wearing my Pellissippi State athletics pullover today. I think the addition of athletics also has added a sense of community as well, right? And that's not the only way our students compete. We've got a Formula One racing team. We've got our culinary students went to a competition last weekend. We've got students building a rocket they're going to take to a university competition. So how do you figure out ways of creating teams and connections and relationships and supports that make students feel like they belong here? And I hadn't even talked about study abroad. Pellissippi State's in the top 5 among community colleges pretty much every year in 4-credit study abroad experiences. So I'm really proud that students can get a collegiate experience here, that there's strong pathways. I think the real focus of our work, and the name of this podcast is At Scale, is how do we make sure that happens for every student who comes to this institution, whether they're part-time, full-time, whether they're an 18-year-old freshman, whether they're a 35-year-old working adult who's parent of 2 kids. How do we make sure that when we talk about the Pellissippi experience, it has all of the elements that we believe are important?
Yeah, we have an internal philosophy here of meet each student where they are. And so I think that's what you're saying, Anthony. And John, I know that's what you guys are trying to do with 865 Academies and the partnerships that you're building there. You want to talk about that a bit and how that fits into this puzzle?
Yeah. So 865 Academies was really for us. We started thinking as a district, kind of the goal had been probably 5 years ago. It was all about graduation rates, right? It was all about getting kids across the stage. And I think we were starting to realize, we needed to move the goalpost a little bit. The goalpost was really about success post high school graduation. And that's on us, but Anthony and his team do an amazing job at Pellissippi to bring these kids in, but were we doing everything we needed to do to make sure that they were ready? And so for us, we started down this journey of, how can kids show mastery and proficiency that they're going to be ready for what they do post high school before they leave, while they still have, caring adults around them, where they still have teachers who are going to give them second chances or ask them to do ask them to, redo an assignment. So, for us, that we thought we were going to have to reorganize and transform and do a transformational process on how we do high schools. And so for us, we work with Ford NGL. The Ford Motor Company has this education branch, and really just started looking for a model for that. So for us, that meant being a lot more purposeful about how we do high school. At that point, it was typical for a freshman to kind of enter, have their 4 years, probably have a little counseling about classes they take and that sort of thing. But by and large, kind of navigated that on their own. We have some schools in Knox County that are, 2,000 plus kids. It's easy to get lost, not be known, not to really think about what you're going to do after graduation to your senior year or maybe into your junior year. And that kind of depends on what group you hang out with and who asks you the right questions. So for us, it was, how do we organize the high school across all of our traditional high schools so that there are purposeful pieces that happen? And really kind of was based on 3 concepts. The first is, how do we make big small? It's hard to be known in big. I hear Anthony saying the same thing, right? About, access was the first thing. And now how are you known while you're on campus? We were the same way. How are you known in your school? And you can't do that when you're big. So big had to get small. So for us, that meant breaking a large school, comprehensive high school, down into smaller units that we call academies. Every school has a freshman academy. And we have some pieces in that I'll talk about in a second. And then after your freshman year, your sophomore through junior year, you go to another academy that is a career themed academy. You still take science, you still take English, you still play in the band, but you're now going to take a series of electives that are aligned to a career path that you can start exploring. So the first part is big and small. The second is guaranteed experiences for us. We started asking, what do we want to guarantee every parent that they can hold us accountable to, that this is going to be, my kid's going to get these experiences? So for us, the freshman year is a freshman academy. All students are in that, and there's a course called Freshman Seminar that all freshmen in Knox County take. And that does a couple things. One, we do aptitude testing in there. And again, kudos to Anthony's team. They take that information, and when they go into college, it's one of the post-secondaries that do that with us at Pellissippi. But it's start seeing what students have aptitudes for, because we know research shows you tend to do what you know unless you know more about yourself. So we do that. There's also guest speakers from local businesses that come in. 5 to 6 of those they get exposure to what careers are out here in Knoxville. And then they also take field trips to places. So that's a guaranteed experience. And the field trips are about, again, local businesses or things they've showed interest in. Sophomore year, we do a post-secondary visit for all of our students. Again, Pellissippi's been a great partner in that. UT, Maryville College, kind of the surrounding schools, Carson Newman. Kids will get on a bus and they go take that trip, and they get the whole kind of on-campus experience. A junior year, the guaranteed experience is a job shadow, 2 to 6 hours that we want every student to get within their academy. So have had great partners like UT Hospital. They're taking over 2,400 of our students in, taking them through simulation labs, like letting them actually spend time. Dr. Keith Gray has been an amazing partner on that. And that's just one of them. Pretty much we've not been told no yet as you go through those. So and then the senior year, there'll be a capstone experience that they have to report out on. All of this for us is, we hope that the kids find one of the 3 E's, as I said before. We want to know that they leave with a plan to enroll. And if you are going to enroll in the post-secondary, we want to know that you've shown that through dual enrollment, you've shown that through an AP class, something to show you can do that level of work. And again, kudos to Anthony. They pretty much opened up their whole catalog of courses to us. So there's no reason why students aren't taking Pellissippi classes while they're with us in high school. And the next would be if you're going to go to employment. And so our career and tech ed group our team has really worked to identify what are those stackable industry credentials that you can get while you're in high school and then finish up in an apprenticeship program, or again, go on to a place like Pellissippi and finish that associate's degree. And then our last one that's kind of come along later has been the enlist. Like there's a lot of opportunities when you enroll or when you choose to serve the country, a lot of benefits for that on trainings that convert over to civilian trainings, a lot of educational opportunities, a lot of like things like the GI Bill that you can go and go on to school for there too. So that's been another focus of ours as well. And I'd say the last part of that, Krissy, is we talked about big to small. We talked about guaranteed experiences. The third is it's actually been finally a viable place for local businesses to be involved. I think prior to this happening, when we're asking for these, can they come to a field trip? Can you come guest speak? Will you be a CEO champion and come visit these schools and offer ideas? Will you help us, lobby the state for curriculum changes to the programs that you need? A lot prior to that's what we're asking them to do now. Prior to that, it was a lot, can you write a check? Can you fund a breakfast, right? And now I think they're seeing that it's more their time and talent that we need than their dollars. And so, again, all 14 of our high schools have that. 8 of our schools next year will roll their first class of seniors into the academies. And then we had 4 this year that started with the freshman academy. So we have 3 cohorts going through at different times.
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah, I would like to see those seniors. Sorry, Ben. We're going to really get this like stepping all over each other. Sounds like fun.
I was just going to say my wife worked in for KCS in STEM, and I was just so impressed. She was there as 865 Academies rolled out, and it was super impressive to me how even down into the elementary level, there was career exposure going on. She was organizing career days at South Knoxville Elementary School, for example. And it was not just starting freshman year, as we've kind of discussed here. That's maybe the most impressive part of all of this is it's a culmination starting in elementary school and really trying to expose students to careers that lead to these 3 E's once they finish up.
I'll say, Ben, that's just important. I think the K-12 in general, K-12 education had kind of taken their eye off that ball. It almost became like the wrong thing to say that we're really trying to prepare people for jobs and careers. It was almost like we didn't want to say that, like we were afraid but ultimately that's what we're doing. We want to hand them off to people like Anthony and TCATS and University of Tennessee. Like all those are the next step to kind of finish and polish that off to get you ready. But the ultimate goal is we want them all to be great citizens, live in Knoxville, continue to contribute to all the great businesses we have, and to stay here and have those jobs. And if you don't start, back to where you said your wife, if you don't start those exposures early on, they don't have that vision of what they need to become. And sometimes they have that kind of 6 years after graduation that they don't really make the most of.
Totally. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we talk a lot here about how Tennessee Achieves is building Tennessee's future workforce. But I mean, really, that's what Pellissippi is doing. That's what Knox County Schools is doing. You can't steal our tagline, for the record. But it really is like, right, this whole like, we're all in this together. And, I think about the community-led work that we've all been a part of the last couple of years around the 70 by 2024 initiative. So thinking about this idea of, and for those listening, it was a group of leaders in Knox County who came together because we care deeply about students. We care deeply about the economic viability of our community, and said, listen, the pandemic sort of wrecked our post-secondary pipeline, true for Knox County, true for the country. What can we do to reset, to create a North Star? And so we all sat around and decided that we would put out what Randy Boyd would call a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal of 70% post-secondary by 2024. Talk to me about why you sat at that table, why you think that goal was so important. Like, reflect on that. Obviously, from our standpoint, this is what we wake up every day and do, but Anthony, you want to talk about it from Pellissippi perspective?
Yeah, it was just such a stark, so we think about 2015 when Tennessee Promise goes statewide and we hit those sort of high water marks for post-secondary college going in the state of Tennessee, and had so much to celebrate. I think, one of the things I remember Governor Haslam saying that he wanted to do was sort of change the conversations around the dining room table about post-secondary and having families, even those who didn't have that, were first-generation families, have that knowledge that, hey, our children can go to post-secondary, they can go to a TCAP, they can go to a community college. There is a pathway for them to have this education that's going to lead to, a different kind of participation opportunity in the workforce. And then you get the pandemic, which is absolutely devastating in terms of enrollment, particularly at community colleges. I mean, 25, 30% enrollment increases. Nationally, we saw the same thing in Tennessee. We saw the same thing at Pellissippi State. We began to look at 10, 12, 15%. 20% declines in college going rate in the state over a very, very short period of time. And in some sense, we're back to where we were in 2013, 2014. We're at 51, 52, 55%. And knowing that that's not adequate if we're going to have the kinds of employees for local business and industry, if we're going to have the kind of communities vibrant that we want to live in and work in and raise our families in and enjoy. So it really was, for us as an institution, the pandemic asked us to question, and our board asked us, how do you reimagine the community college experience in the midst of this significant challenge? And I think it was an important thing to do from a leadership perspective. And I think we did the same thing in a community. How do we, sort of reimagine the connection we want to have with young people and their families, and talking about the importance of post-secondary, not just with the superintendent or the community college president or the university president, but among local business and industry leaders and folks who work in other nonprofit spaces. How can we come together as a community and say, this is still important? Yes, we've been through something that's challenging and difficult, and we've had to come to grips with, and I would say in some way we're still coming to grips with, but we've got to figure out a way to begin to work together to move the community forward. And I think that was one of the exciting things about the conversation and the work and ultimately the outcome.
Jon, any reflection there from Knox County Schools?
Yeah, I think Anthony said it well. I think, what the pandemic did was created chaos. And, when there is the chaos, people tend to take their eye off certain balls because there are other things that are really important, right? And I think that's what we saw. I think we moved away from kind of looking at data as much, and it was more, and again, rightfully so, it was more about taking care of people and that sort of thing. But once we kind of cleared that hurdle, I think we needed that callback as a community to go, what are we going to do in now post this? And it was great to have all those community leaders kind of come together and go, wait a minute, let's get back on track. Let's get back to what we know is going to make our community successful, make our state successful. And sometimes it just takes that focus again. And I think having a goal called out makes people start aligning work to that. And I think that's what we saw. And we needed that, quite frankly. I mean, I think we had, again, how long some of these impacts of everything that happened will be. But what we did know, regardless of that, was we had to have and continue to have a highly educated workforce, highly skilled workforce coming out of all this. And the numbers were kind of staggering. To Anthony's point, they had dropped kind of back to before we had any of these initiatives.
Right.
And I know that just our teams, as far as counselors were still working hard, and teachers and principals still working hard, but a lot of that shift had been caring for people, which we always care for people. I'm not saying we don't, but sometimes the long-term care of people, which was creating this pathway for their future, maybe took a second back seat to what we were doing, and it was time to get that back to the front because we were starting to see a lot of kids disinterested, a lot of kids leaving without a plan, and once that happens, it's real hard to reel them back in. So it was the right time. And like Anthony said, was glad that it was not just one organization calling that out. It was post-secondary institutions. It was K-12. It was business communities. And quite frankly, we've heard it was parents. Like, they were ready to go get our kids like on this pathway, So I think it was well timed and something people rallied around well.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to this idea of creating opportunity. There's always this sort of, right now, I think we have a value proposition challenge with post-secondary. People are questioning, is it worth it? And there are a lot of folks out there who say, college is not for everyone. I mean, we get that push in all the time. But I would argue that some degree after high school, and I would argue a high quality degree after high school, is absolutely necessary. And so these sort of North Stars and coming together as a community, I think, is critical to create opportunities so that students don't feel left out of the pipeline. We as organizations, as K-12, post-secondary, and then, community organizations like Tennessee Achieves, I think it's up to us to really sort of clear the path, create the path, whatever the case may be, so more students can participate. So we've set a new goal, right? Another big goal, 80 by 2028, which I'm really excited about. Think about the work that you're doing now, and what do you think what's going to help us get there, and maybe what's standing in our way?
I'll take first crack at that. So we're excited. Pellissippi State was recognized a few weeks ago by an organization called Achieving the Dream as a leader college based upon the work we had done in terms of improving course success rates and persistence and retention and graduation rates. And many of those numbers are a high watermark for us that we really need to push further. And I think it comes back down to sort of, how do you take what happens in the classroom? How do you provide the holistic supports? One of the things we've benefited from, is our long relationship, Krissy, and our relationship and partnership with Tennessee Achieves. So we think, it's important that all of our incoming students have a coach, right? That they've got somebody who helps them navigate the onboarding process, that helps them stay connected academically, make sure they're on course. For us to do that from a budget perspective would require 4 or 5 more FTE, but we can partner with the coaching program that you developed through Knox Promise and Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise. And that allows us to provide that for all of our students. And I'm absolutely certain that's a contributing factor in, our high persistence and retention rates, that students have that relationship, right? We talked about wanting every student to have a Pellissippi experience. Well, part of that experience is you've got somebody to have a relationship with. And I don't care if you pay them or I pay them. I just want the student to know that somebody associated with this institution cares about them and can help them. It's the same team. We're on the same team. Same team, same goals, same objectives, right? We want that post-secondary success for those students. So we've thought a lot about that. And then we've done some alignment work with what Jon and his team are doing around 865. So taking some of the career interest assessments they're doing and making sure we utilize that tool and saying, hey, you've done this assessment through U-Science. We want to review that. Is that, have you thought about that? How does this, what you did in 865 Academies, if you were interested in audio production then, is that still what you want to do? Do you want to shape that in a different way? Which career community do you want to be a part of? So making sure we take that experience they bring from Knox County Schools in high school as a high school student, and then really layer that through their experience as a Pellissippi State student. And then the final thing we're leading into is career development. And this, again, reaches back into those experiences they have as a Knox County student, making sure that first semester they've got a resume. They're working with not what we used to call career services, and students would access it on the way out the door, but are they working with career development? Are they, going to an offsite experience with an employer in their industry? Are they preparing for the internship that we want them to do in between their freshman and sophomore year? Are they preparing for that capstone experience? And so that career development. We have our graduation fair. We used to call it a graduation fair. We have a graduation and career fair going on right now, where our students are not only getting what the resources they need to walk across the stage in a few weeks, but employers are down there making themselves available for those students who are moving into the workforce. So it's about having that community, having that connection, using all of the resources we have on campus and with our partners, and then building that bridge to success with some intentionality. So that's really what we've got to lean into our next vision. And we call that, we hope to become what we call a career immersion college, right? Whether you're going directly into the workforce or whether you're transferring to a 4-year institution, that you begin to get immersed in the key elements of your professional development and career while you're a student at Pellissippi State.
Yeah, and I love all the intentionality there around creating that really seamless bridge. I mean, very early in my probably Knox Achieves days, even someone told me that where you lose students in the pipeline is in the handoff, right? So the handoff between Jon and Anthony, or between Knox County Schools and Pellissippi State, that's where we start. Summer melt is a phraseology that we often hear about high school seniors, where students who have intentions of attending post-secondary sort of melt over the summer. And I think about like partnerships like this, by 70 by 24 or at Advance 865, this 80 by 28 idea is really, to use your phrase, Anthony, bridging that handoff. So, what they experienced, Jon, with Knox County Schools is just sort of bleeding into what they're experiencing at Pellissippi, where it feels really seamless for students.
Yeah, I just, want to pause to that point, Krissy, and just like, how exciting is this, that we are in a community where this happens. I mean, I've known Anthony's work for a long time, but when you hear, there's not a lot of post-secondaries that are talking about how are we using what they're doing in their high school freshman and sophomore years, that in that pathway direction. And, this whole career community, like kind of what cluster are you in? And, again, Pellissippi has been great for us to be able to send our students, and actually heard stories of students saying, I got to talk to a professor that does this, and wow, now I know I want to do it, on my sophomore visit. So, that it's for any parents listening out there, your student's going to be fine. Like go through Knox County Schools, go to Pellissippi. Like you're going to be on a great path if that's the choice you take. And not every community has that. So I think that seamlessness, like you said, is really important. I think we got to the 70 by 2024 by, I always think about, change management, right? So a lot of that was focus and adrenaline, kind of people going, what do I need to change today to try to get to that goal? And a lot of tracking, and a lot of monitoring, and change my actions today. I think how we get to the 80 by 2028 is going to be a lot more about, smaller details. It's going to be a lot more about systems and structures that now exist, right? That this is how Knox County Schools does it, this is how Pellissippi does it. This is the expectation. Every kid, we talk a lot about that. We've been blessed to have some success in the last 3 years. We start talking about every classroom every day. Like, that's great. We have pockets of greatness, but that has got to expand everywhere. And I think, as our counselors learn to do their work differently, that's a tall order to ask them, who have done something for 25 years a certain way, which has not been wrong. It's just times have changed, and the outcomes we need for kids need to be different. Now, to ask them to do that differently, multiple touches with a student, conversations, looking at the data, like what we're getting from the youth science and things like that, and actually asking kids questions about that, and believing that a 16-year-old can have that conversation, right? All those things are a change of mindset for certain people. But I keep saying, when we're doing that every day at every school, and I've actually gotten to where I'm asking parents to call us out if that's not happening in your school, because we need to find that. That's how we're going to get there. When it just becomes part of the natural rhythm of what we do and the expectation of what we do across the board, I think the 80% will probably start becoming the floor instead of the ceiling.
Love that. Yeah, I'd go back to your original point. As somebody that grew up in Knoxville, and I have an affinity for Knoxville and the things that are happening there, from our perspective at tnAchieves, we work all across the state, and it's such a unique place that a lot of this work is going on. We're starting to hear from other counties and communities who have seen the shared goal that was set by business leaders, mixed with K-12, mixed with colleges, and University of Tennessee was at the table for this too, not to leave them out. So we've had this entire collective of organizations and entities that have come together with this shared belief that college is important, and positive post-secondary pathways are critical for students to really make some intentionality around that. And I don't know that we've really mentioned Advance 865 and what that means, but that was really the putting a stake in the ground that says, from today forward, all of us at this table, from nonprofits to businesses to the education partners, are going to work diligently to make sure that every student that participates in this has some sort of plan when they finish up high school, or when they finish at Pellissippi, what's the next step there, and continuing to just lay out all of that structure so that every student is seen and heard. So I just also wanted to reiterate that. It's just super impressive how everybody in Knoxville is just, I wrote down same team. That's going to be the title of this episode, I think. It's just so impressive how all of these partners, there's no defensiveness around their particular sector, and everybody seems to work so well together.
Yeah, it's super fun for us because we obviously are running a pilot in Knox County Schools called Knox Access. Like, how can we help those school counselors create some bandwidth, right? And I agree, John. I think it's this is probably not a phrase I'm supposed to use, but like it's going to be man-to-man combat now, right? To move from 70 to 80, we're really going to have to meet each student where they are, but at scale, and really think about like, okay, is the TCAT your path? Is the, for your institution your path? Should you start at Pellissippi and Springboard? How are we really thinking in smart ways about how to serve students? And then obviously Knox Promise on the other side. So it's been fun for us to be part of both worlds and to be able to help create spaces for student success, certainly in partnership with what you guys have going on. As you think about all the success, because I'm actually really proud of our community. I think Knox County is really on the cutting edge of alignment and partnership. And to Ben's point, like same team here, right? I mean, we all come in and I think the lovely part about sitting at that table is that for the most part, we all take our hats off and talk about what's in the best interest of students. So, right, no ego there and sort of really pushing in on one another to bring our best selves to the table. Other communities that are looking to emulate the work that we have going on here, suggestions, thoughts, insights, give them all your best ideas, guys.
Do it.
I think some of it just comes, so I'll just say from my perspective, sometimes you have to check your ego at the door, right? I mean, I know in this work, I'm really proud of the work we've done at Pellissippi State over the last few years. And, John, you used the phrase pockets of greatness, and I've used that. And we've got some things that we've done really well. Have we done them at scale? No. Are we moving in that direction now? Yes, I'm proud of that. But I think when we come together as a community, we've got to check that at the door and say, you know what? Who are we working for? And the reality is, in my perspective, we work for the students, right? We work for the families of Knox County. We want to provide the best opportunities for them. So how can we just kind of check whatever baggage we're bringing in at the table and sit down and say, what do we need to do? And at the end of the day, I think most of us want to work in an environment where we can work together. And honestly, Krissy and you and I have joked about, I really don't care who gets the credit. I just want the day the students have a chance to walk across the stage in a couple of weeks and shake their hands and say, hey, good luck, whether they're going straight to work after the weekend after commencement or whether they're planning on going to a 4-year institution. And I think we're generally blessed by leaders who take that approach. And, I just don't understand the notion of territoriality that comes into some of these conversations. And certainly it's happened within this institution and other places. But I think by and large, we live in a community that says we care about the community. We care about families. We want the best for our children.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I would agree with what Anthony said. I think, and I'm going to say this because I've worked with him for a long time. He's never told me no. And that's pretty cool. When you talk about,
you told me no once, and now I'm upset. I wasn't sure that he's actually
moving forward, Krissy. No. Ask me, and I'll ask Anthony for you. How about that?
That is going to be my path moving forward.
Well, I think you can't get there unless you have leaders that think bigger than their organization. Back to what Anthony's saying. If he was only worried about the siloed turf at Pellissippi, then there might be actions he would take different, right? I mean, he's got a board that's asking certain things of him. He's being compared to 3 other community college systems, like all those kinds of things. But he's never lost sight of what he just said, and I think it came so well from his heart. It's the student, right? It's the student, it's the community that we're trying to advance forward. And when you have that bigger kind of thinking from the business community, from the K-12, from the community college, from the nonprofit folks that are coming in on the side, I think that is an incredibly important piece of the recipe to make that happen. You sometimes have to think outside of your own organization to the bigger goal. But I think what we've all learned is when we do that, our organizations thrive too, because it ends up being very much aligned to that work. I was going to say another thing, 2 other phrases that I love to hear, and I've heard from everybody on this call, are the word pilot and the word "let's try," right? Like that's always, we never start full scale, and it's always like, well, let's see. Like it appears the data's telling us this might be something. Well, let's give it a shot. Let's try it out, you know? And I think having that entrepreneurial spirit, having that courage to take a step out of the ordinary and being willing to innovate a little bit. And then I know, Krissy, you won't say this for sure, then tracking the data to see if it needs to continue or not, like it's critically important. And when something does work, scale it up. And when it doesn't work, stop doing it. Like that's okay. It's not a personal defeat, right? It's you know, if we had all those pieces figured out, then we wouldn't be trying to solve these problems, but it takes risk to solve those problems. And again, all these organizations and all you guys on the phone have always been willing to pilot something to try to. I can still remember coming out of COVID, Anthony, our conversation about the whole dual enrollment access, because I had a daughter who was a junior in high school, and you all were kind of pretty much online, and you know, she started taking courses while she was in high school there, and it was kind of like, wait a minute, like maybe we've stumbled on something, you know. And you know, now to hear all of our high schools talking about, well, there's all these dual enrollment courses you could take. If you know, where's your ACT, where you can get that and that. It's like, it's almost just become part of our catalog now that we have access to yours. And had you said, well, wait a minute, budget wise, I don't need to do that, or, you know, I'm really trying to invest in this other strategy, but you didn't, you know, you said, well, let's leave it open for a year and see what happens, you know. And now it's become something very fruitful for both of our organizations. So I do think it takes that willingness to risk and thinking beyond just your organization and the impact it can have on the community.
Yeah, and I do love all the truth telling that happens here too, right? Like I feel like we all have very honest relationships where we can say like, hey, Tennessee Achieves, like you got to really push in here. You're not, you know, carrying your water, or do we think about we could maybe do this better? Or, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've called Anthony to be like, we're hearing this from students, you know, can you help me like track down what's going on here? And so I think that's an incredibly important piece of the puzzle too, is that yes, no ego. Yes, not being afraid of doing hard things, but also just being willing to be like very truthful in your approach on, you know, when you're doing things really well, pockets of excellence. Is that what it is? I like that.
Yeah,
Pockets of greatness. I love it. Anyway, but also, you know, when we're not doing things so great and being like very intentional about how we approach that. Well, guys, I can't keep you all day. I really want to, but on behalf of the entire Tennessee Achieves team, I want to thank you for being our inaugural back to the podcasting world. I think you both are such exceptional leaders. I'm so grateful for your friendship and your support, and all the times that you have said yes to my wild ideas, minus the one that Anthony said no to, that we're going to revisit now at some point.
Yeah, let's go next summer. Hopefully this is not a pilot that gets canceled after one episode.
That's right.
Yeah, I concur. I really appreciate you guys for coming on. I can't think of a more natural place for us to start a new podcasting journey than in Knoxville, where everything else kind of has gotten its start. Dr. Rysewyk, I think you have a podcast. You want to plug that?
Yeah, you know, I appreciate that, Ben. So yeah, and Krissy was actually a guest on it to talk about a lot of the same things about, you know, post-secondary enrollment. So we have the education blueprint. It's really just a chance for us as an organization to tell a little more of the long story behind kind of philosophies or how things work that are people have asked. You know, so we're not trying to compete on a popularity contest. We're really just trying to tell the story longer that, you know, people want to know, how does a snow day work? How do you get enrolled in school? What's the role of military for kids' future? So we've had some great guests on as well to be able to tell some of those stories, and I hope that helps families understand.
Thanks for sharing.
It's really unfortunate that we didn't talk about the FAFSA today, guys. That's really where Jon and I dug in.
Yeah. We'll just cut a piece of that, throw it in here.
Yeah.
It's a riveting conversation.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of At Scale, the Tennessee Achieves podcast. Each conversation is a step toward a deeper understanding of how we can collectively expand opportunity and increase post-secondary access and success for all students in Tennessee. To continue following this work, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode, and your rating or review helps others discover the stories and insights that we'll share. Together, we're not only supporting students, we're building Tennessee's future workforce. Thank you for listening.